Welcome back everybody, Captain Gino here, coming at you with the fishing report for March 2024 on the St. Johns River. I've spent the last week or so, a little bit over a week, in between like the Palatka area all the way down south to Lake Monroe. So the majority of St. Johns Central and St. Johns Lower. I've gone everywhere in this river, from the sloughs, main river, spawning flats, lakes, and everywhere in between. The river, about 10 days ago or so, I spent a bunch of time looking in big spawning flats inside these lakes and these mud lakes, and it was barren wasteland. The place was loaded down with gar and tilapia, which generally signals that it's all just about wrapped up, with water temperatures reaching upwards of 80 degrees. Now, with that being said, after 2 days of painfully running through these areas, I decided I just need to make my way out to the shell bars. Generally, your shell cracker and your bluegill, they happen a little bit later in the year, like May, but I was surprised to find out by this time I was somewhere in the Astor area that there were shell cracker beds everywhere. I'm like, oh my God, how did I miss this? I should have known based on the water temps. These fish were acting like it was summertime, albeit they were pretty fickle because they're, recently post-spawn, we just had a massive wave of spawners pull up. They were absolutely catchable, and they were thick. Like if you got around them, if you focused on, whether it's shell cracker beds or shell bars, close to the lakes on the river or the sloughs, there was piles and piles of fish. And funky, albeit, it seemed like you see a school of fish, you fire to them, you catch one pretty quick, and then you just would throw 1,000 baits 1,000 times and you couldn't get them to eat. It almost made more sense to just let them be and focus on a different school close by, but all these areas were pretty loaded down. Now, with water temperatures nearing 80 degrees in the majority of the river from Palatka all the way down to Monroe, we've had a nasty cold front come up through the last couple days and drop the water temps as low as 69 degrees in some areas. Now, this does not include the springs, right? And I've seen a big push, it seems to be, of fish making their way into those areas again. The gar are on their way out, or if not all gone in most of the areas. The majority of the tilapia are wrapping up, and the bass seem to be going back in. I went into areas here in the last few days that there's a bunch of pretty clean beds, but it was 40 degrees in the morning. They're gone. The bucks were gone. So I struggled to find them. By noon, it seemed like the beds were starting to fill back up, and the females were pretty close by. So I'd suspect in the next 5 days, we're gonna have a full moon. These bucks, we're gonna have warmer temperatures all the way leading up to this full moon. They're up there making beds right now. These females are gonna make a big push, and they're gonna pull up. So I would spend the majority of your focus in these spawning flats, these spawning areas, the springs as well, and the closest shell bars, whether it's a main river point or some shell cracker beds, as close as you can be to the sloughs that you want to focus on, the lakes you want to focus on. Those are great areas to target. As far as George North, the main river, like CSX Railway right there, mouth of Dunn's Creek, in Dunn's Creek, Crescent, areas like that are fantastic. Mouth of the Ocklawaha is great, just north of George right there. And then the shell bars leading into George on the north side, both on north and the south end. Like a lot of guys call it the jetties. They're basically these wooden pylons that come up. There's been a ton of fish there. And just a little bit south into the Astor area, the river's pretty wide there when you get in, coming from Monroe. It'll bottleneck up just a little bit. There's been massive schools of fish there. Insane amounts of fish. I'm talking about from one end of the river to the other, staging up, and they're definitely getting more aggressive. They're definitely a lot fickle than they were a few days ago, despite the cold weather. It's just signaled them to fatten up. The females we're catching are egged up and ready to go, and these males are making that big push back in there. So I suspect the river is gonna just come unglued here in the next 5 days, but man, did I get my teeth kicked in for the first couple days out there. I hadn't been on the river in a little bit. I've been primarily in Harris there for a few weeks straight. So, getting back out there, I expected it to set up one way and it did not. And a lot of guys I was talking to are like, oh man, the river's been going down. They're all excited. I run into guys on the river and this and that. And they're same story from everybody. They were struggling. But once I realized what was happening, it was a heck of a lot better. Now, as far as catching these fish on these bars, I think maybe I caught one 8-inch fish on a soft plastic. All of it's been on crankbaits, whether it's a lipless crankbait, a deep diving crankbait. Glide baits have been decent, but not huge glide baits. 7-inch, 8-inch glide bait. They've been decent. I find that it's definitely a lot easier on the shallower shell bars than the deeper shell bars. It seems like, looking at my active target, seeing these fish, it seems like when I'm on the deeper shell bars, these fish have a lot of time to think about things, and they'll surge your bait over and over and over again and act like they're gonna eat it. They'll come out at 100 miles an hour and then just stop and not eat it. And you'll sit there and rotate a million baits and drive yourself absolutely crazy. But crankbaits, something moving fast, seem to be the ticket on those deeper areas. In the shallower places, when they come, they're coming for it. Like, I was fishing a swim jig around some stuff. They're blowing that thing 2-3 feet out of the water, just absolutely coming unglued on it. I feel like they have less time to decide whether or not they want to eat it. They either got to eat it or don't eat it. So those shallower shell bars seem to be easier fish to catch. As far as the fish on the bars, the quality's good. You know, from Monroe all the way to Palatka, you just got to get around the right places, and don't fall in love with those places and think, oh, I'm just gonna fish shell bars, because those fish might just vanish on you tomorrow or the next day. I love this time of year on the river. It usually happens a little bit later than the lakes. That water temperature, those water temps seem to be a little bit more stable, but it's happening right now. It's going down, and you can catch good numbers and catch good size. I find myself, you know, you can catch decent quality on the bars, you catch decent bags, but if you can get in these shallow lakes, these little mud sloughs, number one, it's like a way easier problem to solve. You know, you're not dealing with such a vast area, and I just seem to catch a lot better quality as far as like the average fish, and I find them that they're easier to catch. You're not going to catch the numbers, obviously. When you're sitting on a shell bar and there's 500 fish on it, you're going to catch way more numbers, and you're going to catch some size. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you're in Astor or down in Monroe in St. John Central, or if you're all the way up in Palatka. I mean, you could still catch 20 pounds pretty consistently on these bars, but if you want to catch those big 30-pound bags and stuff, the lakes are the way to go. The caveat to that would be springs. Any of the springs, there's a ton of fish moving in the springs right now. There's females roaming around, there's bucks locking on. There can be some really good fishing in there, but those fish can, you know, you can see them, they can see you. I find myself in those situations, if I'm trying to cast like sight fish to fish, I want to skip that bait. Maybe there's a bend and there's some lily pads, maybe skip it across and kind of hit them at an angle. And if you're sight fishing, stay way, way, way back. It's going to be way easier on you. If you get super close to these fish, they become, unless they're like, you know, right in the right little phase there, it's going to be a real tricky thing to deal with. Any of these little streams, feeder creeks, residential canals, all along the main river there, where the seawalls, those are always fantastic place to catch fish on bars. Guys overlook them often because you don't necessarily see those fish on your side scan, on your graph. They're really a lot of pretty big steps right there leading up to those seawalls, but there will be like a little ledge. I mean, most of these residential canals are only 4 feet deep. I would say would be the average for the residential canals throughout the entire river, with some little nuance here and there. You know, some of them might have a pond in the back that's got an average depth of 10 foot or something like that, and that can be tricky. You know, like Blue Creek area, there's a series of canals there, maybe 10 canals or so, and I find a lot of staging fish, especially if like a front comes through and blows them off the beds. Instead of pulling out into the main river, they'll pull in that little bay there, or the bombing range off Monroe, like areas like that. They'll pull in those little bays. You can really get on them pretty daggone good there. But with that being said, those shell bars are often overlooked and can be absolutely amazing. Or like, say you have a creek that feeds in and there's a dock there or something like that. Sometimes there'll be shell bars like right under that dock. Maybe there's a little eddy or something like that. These eddies can be small. It could be a cypress tree and just a small swirl. It could be a culvert that sticks out like just south of CSX, just north of Little George. This would be on the east side of the river. The river kind of dips off a little bit, widens up right there. And there's some residential docks, and you'll see like a culvert that comes out. Well, that culvert's created a giant sandbar over time, and there's a little eddy there. It doesn't look like much. You're not gonna find it on your map. But places like that, you can pull up to and get fat real quick. It can be absolutely amazing. But so don't overlook that type of stuff. Don't think you just gotta run down this river and look for those obvious shell bars and deeper shell bars. Everybody's gonna be on them. And it can be quite confusing from George north. There's a ton of different bait in the water this time of year, and a ton of different predator fish species as well. It's really easy to get hung up on stuff that's not bass and be there for a long period of time. And there's a lot of guides that run, like I would say from George to Palatka right there. You got the CSX guides. They hammer those sections of the river pretty hard. Those fish get real pressured and they can be really funky to catch. Then when you have dropping water temps, makes it even funkier. And then with the possibility of those fish just packing up and moving on you because of bait or because they're pulling up the spawn, it can be real frustrating. So, you know, I like to kind of look for the smaller little problems to solve. Mouth of Murphy's Creek's really fantastic. In fact, there's some bluegill beds, some shellcracker beds just at the mouth. Like there's a set of pads leading in, which would be on the southern side of Murphy's Creek. So you call your river north to south. Like if you're going north and you hang right into Murphy's Creek, there's a hard line of pads that run down. It's got some shell running down it. And then you got some, like a sandy shoreline there. and a little rope swing and boat usually sitting there. Then it gets kind of soft here in the middle. Well, and there's a big overhanging oak tree, and there's shellcracker beds all up underneath it right now, and some shellcracker beds going through even that softer stuff where it's mushy. If you put your pole down there, it's pretty hard once you get past that mush, so they'll clean it off and use that. But you know, places like that, all those big hard turns, like if you look at, you go in Duns from the main river, you know, 4 or 5 bends in there, you'll find a bunch of residential canals. Those outside little channel swings, or, you know, the little flats that have feeder creeks that are feeding into it, those are all great places to target with a swim jig. For me, I like to throw a white dirty jig exclusively. A lot of guys are throwing black, blue, you know, green pumpkin, things like that. I like to throw white. I feel like white does exceptional on the river. It's always done good on the river. It doesn't matter north to south. I do fantastic with it year round. But yeah, target those areas with swim jigs, fantastic. Buzzbait's been pretty decent. It hasn't been completely on fire. Devil's Horse, frog works really well. Any of the brush hanging down into the main river channel there, anywhere on these hard bends or close, you know, outside channel swing, or if it's a point right there, these fish will set up on that stuff and you can crank it and do really well. All the residential canals, like inside Duns there, they have little ledges. A lot of them have shellcracker beds right up on top of those ends. Those fish will set up right there. And then there's lily pads, you know, pretty much throughout. Now, I typically do a lot better green pumpkin and chartreuse. Like I'll take green pumpkin, put a little bit of chartreuse on the Senko. For whatever reason, in the residential canals on the river, I just do better with that color combination than black blue. I feel like everybody's throwing black blue in there, so that green pumpkin chartreuse is fantastic. But the mouths of those canals are really, really good. You know, the fish that are staging, they just want to eat. That's all they care about. Eat, and then in the next few days, reproduce. And then they're going to be funky, and they're going to need to eat again, but they're going to be in a funk. Some of those, you know, the males are obviously going to be there until these bucks are fry or free swimming, which takes a few weeks. So they'll kind of linger around. Some of them will get picked off, some will not. The females oftentimes will get into some real thick stuff close by, but it'll be a little while for them to mosey out into that current. By the time, you know, give them a week or two and they'll be out there again anyways. But, you know, after this wave of spawners, it's going to be, I feel like it's going to be a really big wave. It's set up like this 4 years ago to where we had kind of some early small little waves, and February was like insane. And then all of a sudden the fish are acting like it's summertime and they're loaded up on the bars, and poof, they disappear. Like you see guys catching bags, and all of a sudden, bang, it doesn't take nothing to win a tournament because those fish are on the move. And it's food and reproduction that drive these fish. And you're dealing with shad out there, a ton of shad moving through. They move in, they spawn into the freshwater from the ocean, and then they make their way back out. Somewhere in December, they hit the beaches again. But so bluegill, huge. Obviously, north of George, you're dealing with sardines, all kinds of crazy stuff up there until October or so. Then you got shrimp coming in. But as of right now, shad and bluegill, that's what I'm looking for on a lot of these bars. And I'm looking for the ones closest to the spawning areas, but expect for these fish to make a move really soon. If you get out there while they're still in the bars, there's hundreds of them. I sat on one literally for 8 hours. I just sat in one spot the entire day and wailed on fish. And you know, it would come in flurries. You might have to work. You're looking at these fish, and it's like you catch them on this color crankbait, then you got to throw this color crankbait. It's like you get 1 or 2 bites off each one. And then I always keep a topwater cocked, some sort of like pencil pop or something like that, ready to go. Because if you start seeing that bait come to the surface, you'll see the bass blow through and they'll explode. And I generally catch some really better quality in those situations. Those fish are susceptible to that. In the lakes, like Crescent, things like that, I did way better on shallow shell bars. You know, 2 to 4 foot. The deeper stuff, I really couldn't get on a good bite on any of those deeper bars, but 2 to 4 foot, really close to spawning areas. What do you want to look for in a spawning area? Some sort of current seam or something like that. You want to see it like no current back behind these pads, and you need light penetration. So you don't want to have some super dark area with overhanging oaks. Yeah, there's no current back there, but there's no light penetration. Those fish are not going to spawn there. You need some place that's going to get some sun, some place that's shallow enough to get some sun, and obviously is not overshaded, and there's no current. You know, those eggs will blow right out of there. I know they make a bowl, but it's not like a tilapia. It's a very shallow deal. Don't always look for light spots. Sometimes it'll be on roots, things like that. Shells, golf balls, whatever they can find, hard to rub out on. But that is the deal for March, y'all. A lot of movement over the last 10, 15 days, a lot of movement. These fish were, say 4 weeks ago, it was absolutely insane in the main lakes, in the sloughs, things like that off the river. Guys are just knocking them down. My brother lives on the river. I mean, everybody's hammering them, but poof, like that, overnight, it changes. And that is what spins us out down here. Whether you're local, non-local, doesn't matter. These movements are constant this time of year and can really throw you for a loop, and these fish get really in a negative mood. The fronts really put them in a negative mood. I found this last front, not necessarily put them in a negative mood, it caused a lot of dirty water in a lot of places. That made them a little funky. Yeah, the water temps dropped 10 degrees, but by the end of today, I want to say that it came back up another 6 degrees in these shallower areas. And yesterday was the same thing, and it dropped. I think it went from like close to 80 down to 70. This morning it was 69 when I got out there, but it's 42 degrees out. But it ended right around 60s, 77, 76, both last couple days after this front. But that muddy water, and the drops, the shifts in temp, I don't think that it necessarily moves the bass so much as it moves the bait. And the bass, like if you're talking about non-spawning fish, like these fish that are on these bars and stuff, it's the bait. That's all they care about. All they care about is eating. And don't be deterred if you spend 2 hours graphing the river and don't see anything. Again, like they're all together. I'm telling you, you can go miles and then hit a bar like right there at the mouth of George, just a little south of the mouth of George, whatever. And there's like hundreds, if not thousands of bass. And they're end to end, man. At one point in time, a few days back, there was like 4 boats had pulled in there, but I could give a crap. I'd been there all morning. It didn't even matter because we were so far from each other and there's so many fish, it wouldn't make a difference. They're thick. So hopefully this information helps you out. If you like information like this and you want to see some more, learn some more about the river, we have the most in-depth look at this river. I'm talking about, I break this river down. I've spent my life out there. You know, my first bass right there was down there. I don't know if you can see it. Caught that in 1986 on the St. Johns River. I've spent a lifetime out there. It kind of dates myself. I mean, not that my face doesn't. The sun kills me, but I've spent a lifetime on that river. I've spent more time on that river just about anywhere. And I didn't realize it until I sat down and started breaking these videos down. But just an example, I mean, I think I spent an hour and a half just explaining one section of the river there. So there's nothing like it online. I've tried to research and research and research. You can find some stuff about like, you know, the biomass in the river, things like that. But there's no real good information. We're the best resource for fishnology. We give waypoints to the fish catches included in this video, many, many more. We have full exclusive breakdowns on the St. Johns River, the Harris Chain, Toho is coming right around the corner. We got a bunch of new stuff coming for the St. Johns River. But if you're into that and you're looking to grow as an angler, looking to learn the area a little bit better, you should check it out. It's $20 a month for members. We do live Q&As. If you're looking to grow, there is no better place. Check us out, fishnology.online. Links down below. Till next time, everybody, tight line.